Charlottesville, Albemarle County. The body of a female student is discovered by her roommates in their college campus apartment at the University of Virginia.
The 911 call was placed by her roommates to police because they had found her face down on her pillow in bed.
The victim has been subjected to a violent attack in her residence.
They also discovered a door with a hole kicked in.
Police arrive at the scene and quickly identify the young woman as 22-year-old Yardley Love, a senior college student just weeks away from graduation. Investigators learn that Yardley had recently broken up with her college boyfriend, a 22-year-old fellow student and athlete who already had a troublesome past.
I don't think she was afraid of him at all, but eventually the threats turned deadly.
This is the story of a jealous lover, his uncontrollable rage, and the tragic consequences it would have for the family and friends of Yardley Love.
She found the good in every soul that she met and the good in every situation she encountered. It's happening to the family next door, which is exactly what Yardley was, the girl next door.
The University of Virginia is located in the city of Charlottesville, approximately 120 miles southwest of Washington, D.C.
Charlottesville is a very genteel community and a beautiful university for some of America's brightest students.
In May 2010, this idyllic college town is rocked by the brutal death of a young female college student. Yardley Love, a 22-year-old student at the University of Virginia, is found unresponsive in her campus apartment, with clear signs of trauma following a violent struggle.
Yardley's two roommates came home and they found her face down in her bed. Initially, they just thought she was passed out. Then they saw blood and they realized something very violent had happened to her, and they called 911.
Officers from Charlottesville Police Department respond to the call and arrive at Yardley's apartment on 14th Street.
When police arrived, they saw the blood on the pillow. They saw obvious signs of a struggle. They saw the door had been kicked in, and they realized something terribly wrong had unfolded.
News of the tragedy soon reaches Yardley's family in her hometown of Cockeysville, Maryland.
It was probably 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was asleep. A policeman came to my door, and when I opened the door, they asked me if I was Yardley Love's mother. I said yes, and then I guess everything went blank after that. I don't think the policeman even had to tell me.
I was in my exam week of my last year of college, and I had actually stayed up late studying with a friend, and I was so tired, and my phone was ringing at 6 o'clock in the morning. When I answered the phone, she said that it was Katie and that I should wake one of my friends up because she had something really bad to tell me.
About 5:45, Monday morning, May 3rd, and I got a call on my phone, and it was my administrator who had told me that there had been an accident that involved Yardley and that there was a lot of blood. And I said, well, what did she hit? And where was she going? Was she in town? And she said, she's been beaten up, and they found her dead in her bed.
8:29 a.m. on May 3rd, one of my dearest friends was an assistant coach at UVA. She said, are you driving? I said, I'm at work. I need to tell you that Yardley Love has been murdered. And there was this silence. She said the state troopers had just been at Mrs. Love's to let her know. And we both started crying.
Police now want to learn more about Yardley's life on campus in the weeks leading up to her murder.
Police asked the roommates what they knew, and all they could say is we had come home and walked in on this. Police officers then asked who could have done this, and the roommate said, George.
Yardley had been in a relationship with another student at the university, 22-year-old George Hughley, but they had recently broken up.
When the police officer said, "Do you have any idea who would ever want to hurt her?" I said, "She did used to date a jerk, and his name was George, but I can't imagine that anyone that could love Yardley could do this to Yardley."
George Hughley was in his final year at the time of Yardley's death and played with the university men's lacrosse team.
Yardley lived in one building with some of her lacrosse teammates, and George lived across the parking lot in another building with some of his lacrosse teammates. There was no evidence of forced entry into Yardley's building because so often the teams just left the doors open between them.
From the start, George was way more interested in Yardley than Yardley was interested in George. The first time we talked, he told me, "You have to get your best friend to like me and go out with me." And at that time, she had a boyfriend who was another one of his teammates on his lacrosse team. And I remember thinking that didn't really feel right that he was saying that, especially because it was his teammate that she was dating at the time.
I knew that Yardley started to date a guy on the lacrosse team at the beginning of her second year. They were all friends their first year, but then it actually turned into a romantic relationship at some point during her second year.
It was just so many experiences and parties and dates and being out together that he finally wore her down in a sense, and her two best friends were dating his two best friends, and so it honestly became easier for her just to sort of explore what that would be like to take their relationship from friendship to romantic.
Police very quickly knew that they needed to interview George, and they began to understand from conversations with others that the couple had had some tension, that George had made some threats.
The first time that I truly questioned him as a person was a night that we were home over a break that we were back from college, and we went out together to a bar, and then we came back and we were sleeping at my parents' house, and she hadn't been texting him back or answering his calls. I think he called her 30 times in a row, and she just brushed it off. And I remember being so rattled by the fact that he would not stop calling her, even when she finally did answer and said, "I'm at Catherine's house and we're going to bed and I'll talk to you in the morning," and that wasn't good enough. And he immediately went on this very aggressive offense where he was accusing her of, "You're not at Catherine's, I know you're with a guy," and she had never done anything like that to make him think that. And I remember in the morning asking her, "Is that normal?" And she was like, "Yeah, he just gets protective and he wants to know what I'm doing all the time." And I remember that was the first time that I started to be a little bit more concerned that he really wasn't a good person for her to be spending time with.
Investigators now want to speak to Hughley about his movements on the night of Yardley's death and bring the student in for questioning.
George said Yardley was upset. He described a confrontation. George said he had gone to her apartment, that he was trying to get her, in his words, to chill. He said that she was standing with her back against the wall and that she began bouncing her head off the wall. He said he might have grabbed her. He said he might have thrown her on the bed. He said he left her alone.
He didn't think that he had hurt her. He certainly didn't think he had killed her. He said she was alive when he left and that he could never do that, but he had been drinking heavily the day before, and his memory was not on point.
Police search George Hughley's campus apartment and uncover suspicious bloodstains in the bathroom.
I think that he slowly started to spiral out of control once she really broke up with him for the last time. I think he knew that it was done forever. I think she had made it very clear, we're graduating college, we're finally going to be separated from one another geographically, I'm not going to be forced to see you all the time, and this is it. I'm going to just tough it out the rest of college, even if it means missing things, because I cannot stand to be around you anymore, and this is now really unhealthy, and I don't want to be anywhere near you.
Hughley undergoes a medical examination, which reveals fresh cuts and bruising on his body.
I didn't understand the magnitude of that jealousy and that fear of what if she's not mine forever.
Hughley continues to protest his innocence in Yardley's death, But investigators now believe they have enough evidence to formally charge him with murder.
Police zeroed in on what they believed to be true, that Yardley had been the victim of a massive assault, had been injured gravely, and that George had a role in it. There were no other suspects. The DNA evidence clearly put him at the scene, and he was arrested the next day for her murder.
George Hughley is remanded in custody awaiting trial for the murder of Yardley Love, while Charlottesville and the close-knit university campus community try to come to terms with the senseless tragedy.
I couldn't tell the team what had happened until George was arrested. So we needed him in custody before we could let anyone know. I mean, people fell to the floor, the guttural pain, the shock. I remember the hugs, I remember the silence. Just being able to hear kind of the tears and the crying. Every single player that walked into the lawn room that we were in, when I said that Yardley had been hurt and that she wasn't okay.
May 2010, Charlottesville, Virginia. 22-year-old college student Yardley Love has been brutally murdered at her campus residence.
This is a murder that stunned the college community. University of Virginia and Charlottesville are not places where these sort of things are supposed to happen.
The police investigation quickly focuses in on Yardley's ex-boyfriend, George Hughley, who has a history of violent and controlling behavior.
That morning, by 9 o'clock, he was in custody and being interrogated. He didn't think that it was possible that she was dead.
Police did not consider any other suspects in her murder. And as they began to ask questions of Yardley's friends, it became apparent to police and to the friends themselves that each of them had small pieces of the story, but none of them had been successfully able to put together the puzzle that Yardley's life was in danger.
George was a very jealous person. He just had his own insecurities that made him judge and question other people. I think he wanted everyone to know that they were together, and so he had a really hard time when they weren't together, if they were both back home at their own hometowns or, out even at college doing their own thing. That usually started a fight because he would pick a fight and try and get attention, and he didn't like that she was spending time with other people. He wanted to be the center of attention, and Yardley was very independent.
Yardley's family and friends struggle to understand how they failed to see the warning signs in Hughley's behavior.
There was one incident when they were all at a party and he grabbed her, and that scared her. But that was the only time she ever mentioned that she was afraid of him, because I was going to go talk to his lacrosse coach, and she said, "Oh no, it's not that big of a deal. Don't worry about that."
I think they had stretches where the relationship was strong, and then there were stretches where Yardley couldn't really even stand to talk about him. He was driving her crazy, but because of the close-knit sense of their college community, especially as lacrosse players, she couldn't really escape him. And so she always sort of tried, I think, to find a way to make it easier for everyone and pacify the group and just go with the flow, and then they would find their way back to one another.
I'm fairly sure that most of the adults in Yardley's life have 20/20 hindsight and wish we had handled things differently or been more aggressive in terms of, separating them or getting her out of that situation.
Both Yardley and George played on the lacrosse teams for the University of Virginia and bonded initially over their love for the game. News of Yardley's death sends shockwaves through the tight-knit lacrosse community.
Our reaction was, how do we take care of our team? We let the men take care of the men's team. They were grieving the loss of Yardley as a great friend to them, not as a teammate, but they were also then like, how could one of our teammates do that to one of our friends?
It was all in. It was truly a resounding reflection of the lacrosse community and, in a larger sense, the Notre Dame prep community. Some of the younger girls on the team had older sisters that played with Yardley. There were also people who had brothers that played on the men's team at UVA. We had a big game at the end of the week. We asked Sharon. Sharon said, ask the girls what they want to do. And they said, we want to play.
The funeral that weekend is when we really saw the men's team come again. And a lot of the men's players were the pallbearers. That was huge. It was huge for me to see. I knew that they were going to be involved, but when they walked in to a packed church carrying Yardley, it was, I thought, another amazing statement from Sharon Love and from Lexi and the family that the team didn't do this to Yardley. This was George that did this to Yardley, and she wanted Yardley's friends to feel loved by her just like Yardley had loved them.
Yardley Love grew up in the city of Cockeysville, near Baltimore, Maryland, surrounded by a loving family and a close network of friends.
We had neighborhood teams everywhere. When she was 5 years old, she went and played lacrosse, which was kind of just chasing dirt on the ground. She just took to it, practiced all the time. A lot of play was bouncing lacrosse balls off the garage doors.
I met Yardley when I was 10 years old. Our older sisters actually went to the same school that we ended up going to, and they're the same year as well. So we had a similar family dynamic, and our sisters thought that we would be friends once we started at the same school. And then honestly, from the day we met, we became best friends.
I met Yardley as a middle school student. There were probably 25 spots on the team, and there were probably over 100 people trying out for those 25 spots. So for a freshman to make varsity, it's quite a feat. As a lacrosse player, she had great skills. She was on task all of the time. She was one of the first people up to the field to get warmed up and start practice.
I met Yardley at lacrosse camp. The whole team seemed to come to Charlottesville to come and play lacrosse for 3 or 4 days. Yardley came to camp full of life, always friends, but always looking out for the people that she didn't even really know, which is what I was drawn to at first. And then I started watching her play, and she was very talented.
But Yardley's sense of responsibility for her teammates and inner drive for success has its roots in an earlier family tragedy.
Losing Yardley's dad was a huge pivotal moment for her and for her family, and honestly for our friend group as a whole. Just seeing that life is short and seeing the emotional maturity that we sort of needed to pull together. And I think losing him was very, very hard for her. And I think that a big part of her drive and what really kicked her into gear was wanting to make him proud.
Yardley receives a lacrosse sports scholarship from the University of Virginia and moves to Charlottesville to begin her freshman year majoring in political science.
When Yardley was a freshman, she would come over to my co-coach, Lisa, and I, and she would thank us at the end of every practice. She would thank us at the end of class. She would thank us at the end of every game. And I'll never forget that.
Living on campus offers Yardley the opportunity to socialize and mix with players from the university men's lacrosse team. Yardley is introduced by mutual friends to fellow freshman George Hughley, an All-American lacrosse player.
I had heard of him, but I can't say that I actually knew him. We do share fields and we pass each other, and they are in helmets and pads and whatnot.
The spell that she was able to cast on so many people, he had just totally kind of fallen for her. I think for a long time she tried to keep it at a friendship because she did think he was funny and she loved to laugh. She was drawn to his sort of the character that he could be.
She was excited. It was her first real in-town college boyfriend. Her friends were dating his friends, and it just made sense. It was who she was hanging with anyway, and he had a lot of friends around him on the guys' team and on our women's team.
I didn't meet him very often because when the girls played in town, the boys played out of town.
But Hughley's larger-than-life persona fails to impress everyone he meets.
I met him once at UVA when they were both playing in Charlottesville, and he came to my house once and had dinner and spent the night. I thought he was very laid back, somewhat unambitious, and he seemed immature.
He came off as very loud and charismatic and silly. I'd noticed from the first few encounters that I had with him that he could be very hot and cold. And I just thought he was like a little bit too much. It was my best friend's boyfriend who we spent time together because of that reason only.
As the relationship between Yardley Love and George Hughley begins to deepen, he starts to display jealous and controlling behavior towards her.
There was more than one episode of violence witnessed by others when George had attacked Yardley. In one occasion, members of a rival lacrosse team from the University of North Carolina responded to pull George off of Yardley as he attacked her.
All of these behaviors started to really escalate and to surface as they got deeper into their relationship, and then as she was pulling out of that relationship.
George was just so good at working his way out of his bad behavior and covering up for it and almost like turning it around a lot of times or making light of it and being the jokester, that he got away with so much for so long because he found his way out.
In another instance, George attacked a fellow member of his own team who had walked Yardley home.
I remember her thinking that it was so strange and she was honestly so disgusted by it. His friends were the exact same way. They would agree with everything that Yardley said and they would feel the same way about his behavior. But then he just had this way of being this jolly, funny, sweep it under the rug, it's not that serious, and he would talk everyone out slowly but surely.
Cracks begin to appear towards the end of graduation year.
They dated on and off from our second year of college through the first half of our fourth year of college, so on and off for like 2 years.
George and Yardley were 2 weeks from graduation, and they had broken up. He had been obsessed with her. Police believed that while he wanted to play the field, he didn't want anyone else to have Yardley.
Really, he was running around on her behind her back and things like that. That's why she left him. And he was fine with that until she met somebody else.
That like set something off inside of him that slowly just got like deeper and deeper. And then I think he was in such a bad mental state that the inner demon within him came out and he made the worst decision of his life.
Charlottesville, Virginia, 2010. Police have arrested 22-year-old George Hughley for the murder of fellow college student and former girlfriend Yardley Love at her university campus apartment. Yardley was discovered with blunt force trauma injuries sustained during a prolonged physical attack.
Yardley losing her dad made her grow up a lot faster than the average 20-something-year-old, and so she was very easily able to like go do things on her own. She really valued her friendships with her girlfriends. Her mom and her sister she spent a ton of time with, so she was never someone that like loved having a boyfriend and wanted to just like stay in and hang out with a boyfriend. She was on the go because that was just the way she was. She was independent.
Investigators now look into Hughley's past as they build the court case against him for first-degree murder.
In the Chevy Chase community of suburban Washington where George hailed from, there were those who saw in the allegations an echo of George's own father's behavior. George and his father both had run-ins with police. Those who knew the younger George in college saw a young man who was reckless, who felt he was above the law, who felt he could get away with anything that he wanted to. And in many ways, they portrayed that as an echo of the way he was raised by his father.
Evidence of Hughley's erratic and violent behavior emerges from multiple sources.
George unfortunately had a known history of violence and of threats.
He just had a really fast temper, really compulsive, I think, like, you know, quick to fly off the handle and physical, like he had gotten in fights with other people.
As the investigation unfolds, police discover that Hughley had tried to cover his tracks after attacking Yardley.
He tried to remove the evidence. He'd taken carpets from Yardley's apartment. He'd taken laptops, perhaps to delete emails that documented their tensions and his threats. He took away a Virginia lacrosse shirt with red stains, socks, anything that had bloodstains on it. Police found all this evidence in the dumpster outside the apartment. In the investigation, police were able to uncover texts and emails that he had sent threatening Yardley. In his past, there were episodes of his excessive drinking and his arrests for drinking and his punishments for drinking, much of which was unknown to the university athletic community at the University of Virginia. But it was well known among George's peers and among Yardley's friends that he was prone to violence when he drank.
Police retrace Hughley's steps on the day of Yardley's murder.
Earlier that day, George Hughley had been playing golf with his father. George and his father had been drinking all day, and they'd been seen having an argument outside of a parking garage. Later on, George went to the neighborhood bar Boylan Heights, where some of their friends had been hanging out. Yardley had been there for a little while, and then one of their mutual friends walked her home. This sparked a jealous rage by Hughley, because he was obsessed with her.
This fell in line with his personality. This wasn't like, a golden boy all of a sudden has a mental breakdown. This was a lot of questionable things that he had been doing for years, and then this was the one that really actually finally got him in trouble.
Despite the overwhelming evidence linking him to the crime, Hughley continues to fight the prosecution's case against him.
George Hughley never did admit to the crime, never apologized to myself or my daughter for what he did.
The DA can only work with what the police gather. The DA will direct the police. The DA will say, we're strong in this area, we're weak in this area. So the DA always guides an investigation that police then must carry out.
On the 18th of April 2011, after a not guilty plea from Hughley, a grand jury indicts him on first-degree and felony murder charges.
It's never enough for an alleged assailant to say, I did it. Police and prosecutors still have to go to great lengths to build a case, to collect the evidence, to collect statements, to collect the statements of others, to gather the testimony. In the same way that reporters try to look for multiple sources, police have to find multiple sources to back up what an assailant says or doesn't say, because at any point the assailant could change his or her mind.
On the 7th of January 2012, 5 additional charges are added against Hughley: felony murder, robbery of a residence, burglary, entering a house with intent to commit a felony, and grand larceny.
The DA was presented with a very strong case. The evidence was there, the motives were there, the testimony was there. His family brought to bear money and connections to reduce the punishment against him. Early on, one of George's attorneys told the media Ms. Love's death was not intended, but an accident with a tragic outcome.
Justice for Yardley still hangs in the balance as her family and friends prepare for the trial. Charlottesville, Virginia. Student George Hughley is awaiting trial for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, 22-year-old Yardley Love, in May 2010. Yardley was found unresponsive in her college campus apartment by her roommates.
Police asked the roommates who might have done this, and the roommates immediately pointed them to George Hughley.
Yardley never told me that she was scared of him, but Yardley was a people pleaser, and I think Yardley was so worried about worrying other people that she felt guilty making someone else take on her stress and some of her anxieties. But I know she told other people that she was scared of him.
The trial begins on the 6th of February 2012, nearly 2 years after Yardley's death.
It took 2 years to get to the trial, so when it finally did happen, it was hard coming face to face with George Hughley again.
There was no way I wasn't going to go to the trial to support her family and to be there for her still. But sitting through and having to relive the moment-to-moment playback of what happened the night that she died was awful. and having to hear like a police officer use such cold terminology or the medical examiner explain her injuries like made me physically ill.
In court, the judge was very, very sensitive to the privacy of the family members. Only the worst images were shown to the jury, but not to the assembled crowd or to the media. Family did not see the visual of George's 46-minute interrogation, but they heard the audio. They heard George, they heard his anguish when he discovered that Yardley was dead. They heard him deny that he had any role in it. They heard his disbelief that her life had been taken. At one point during the interrogation, when confronted with Yardley's loss, he actually said to police, "Kill me."
Despite Hughley's history of violent and controlling behaviour, there is insufficient evidence to prove he had planned to murder Yardley on the night he went over to her apartment.
Originally, he was charged with first-degree murder. The charge was dropped to second-degree murder because prosecutors didn't believe that there was any evidence that this was premeditated.
On the 22nd of February 2012, the jury finds George Hughley guilty of the second-degree murder of Yardley Love and an additional charge of grand larceny.
There did not seem to be ever any doubt that there would be a conviction in this case. Ultimately, so many of these cases do rest on convincing 12 people that someone has committed a crime.
It's a little nerve-wracking not being sure what the outcome would be. I didn't think he would get off, but I thought maybe the charges would be manslaughter or something reduced.
We actually went down for a couple days to support Sharon, and from our conversation with Sharon and from seeing how that district attorney handled it, I don't think that there was anybody that was more dedicated to making sure that Hughley was convicted than that man that handled that case, and he did a magnificent job.
The DA in this case had enough evidence to present to jurors who made the decision that George Hughley was guilty.
You watch the whole process hoping that the jury saw it the same way we did, and they did.
On the 30th of August 2012, Hughley is sentenced at Charlottesville District Court.
Jury sentenced George to 23 years in prison for second-degree murder and 1 year for burglary.
George Hughley will get out in 5.5 years. He'll still be young. He'll still have a full life ahead of him. I hope he's changed, but I don't think he has.
With Hughley now safely behind bars, Yardley's family and friends reflect on the impact she had on the lives of everyone she met.
It seemed like everybody loved Yardley. I never heard an unkind word. You don't know really what your child does once they're not under your roof. And so when this happened, you don't know what somebody's going to say or do, or some experience that I know nothing about. But every single thing said about Yardley was so kind, and people just rallied around so much. I think she was just a really good person.
A lot of people felt that Yardley was very special, but I think it was a lot of the things that she did when no one was watching that really set her apart as a friend and a person. She didn't do the right thing for accolades. She did it because she had an amazing moral compass, and I think for her it felt good to do the right thing because that was just how she was, and that was in her DNA.
If she was your daughter, you would pat yourself on the back and say, I crushed it. I really raised an amazing young woman. She was as beautiful on the inside as on the out, and she was as good a friend as you could ever have.
The seniors, when they were going the week of prom, would get up and they would describe their dresses to each other. At the end of practice, we'd take 10 minutes and we'd say, okay, you two stand up and let's hear about your prom dresses. And of course, it was Yardley's turn, and she stood up and she used a term. I said, Yardley, I don't know what you're talking about. It sounds beautiful. I'm sure it will be beautiful on you. And she said, you know what, Miss B, I will come and show you the day of prom. I said, Yardley, you're going to have 5,000 things to do. You're not going to want to come on campus and show me your dress. I'll be there. So she left a pre-party with her dear friend, and they came in their full prom dresses to an afternoon the prep at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when they're supposed to be off being very girly and getting ready for their prom. I was always moved by that, because nobody else was going to do that. But it meant the world to me.
Following the tragedy of her daughter's death, Yardley's mother, Sharon Love, creates a non-profit organisation to raise awareness among young people of the hidden signs of domestic violence.
What connected with me more than anything was not the trial, was not the murder, but was the reaction of Yardley Love's family after the fact, to find the best things about her, to celebrate and use those as a way to empower other young women and men to be alert to the dangers that had taken Yardley's life.
We had 2 years between when Yardley was murdered and when the trial started, and it gave me time to do research. And I realized, surprisingly, that 18 to 24-year-olds are the most vulnerable group of people to domestic violence. So that was when I decided we had to do something.
One Love started with Yardley's mom and sister and all of her cousins and friends and all our coaches and teammates wanting to do something. Everyone just felt so hopeless and so devastated, and so we wanted to come together to do something. And so it started honestly as just selling t-shirts and raising money to create a turf field at our high school for the future students to play on.
The university convened a vigil drawing more than 1,500 people. The university president spoke to the assembled students and said that at no point should any woman, any student, have to fear these kinds of circumstances. It elevated the conversation about partner abuse, about domestic abuse, about awareness and red flags and things that people should be aware of. And the university took a leading role in trying to put that forward, which the family itself then followed through on.
I never thought about domestic violence in that age group ever. When I grew up, it seemed that people were married with children and trapped with no income and couldn't get out. That was my image of domestic violence.
I cannot tell you the places I've been and I see like a One Love sticker or a One Love t-shirt, and the number of people that come up to me to tell me that they participated in a workshop or that One Love saved their life or one of their friends' lives. It's definitely one of my proudest accomplishments, is being part of a movement that has made such a difference already.
They really helped. They helped kind of get it out there. This is not just happening with families that are marginalized. This is happening in a lot of different places, and we need to start to pay attention to it.
I can say in full confidence, the work the One Love Foundation has done in Yardley's honor and memory has absolutely saved lives, and it is absolutely going to continue to do just that. I'm incredibly proud and grateful for the work that's been done.
Our student body approaches their relationships differently because of the education of the One Love Foundation and because it hits so close to home. I want to say that we are adding a thread of protection for our young lives that needed to happen.
Yardley Love's legacy is commemorated at Notre Dame Preparatory High School, where a lacrosse playing field has been named in her honor.
My silver lining will always be that I taught her, I coached her. She made a huge impact on me, and I miss her every day. But while she was here, she made the world a better place. And even in her passing, she's made the world a better place.
It's always the hope when I cover a story like this that it informs and it educates. And that people, if they don't see themselves, maybe they see someone they know. And that this story is a way for people to begin looking out for others in their world.
The University of Virginia also remembers Yardley every year, in their own special way.
Every May 3rd, since 2011, the women's lacrosse team has painted Beta Bridge, which is this huge bridge that really connects kind of the central grounds over to the fraternities and sororities world. So everybody comes up and down Rugby Road, but you paint the bridge. You could paint it in 1 hour. It could be somebody could paint over it immediately. Like, people don't even let that paint dry necessarily. They write our website. They help people understand as they pass that bridge, walk on that bridge, see that bridge, take pictures of the bridge, that, you know, hey, we lost somebody really important to the university. We lost somebody who had the brightest future as of anybody. So just take a moment, go to the website, learn, and just pay attention to what we're doing.
I think every parent wants to do something to remember their child, and I would suggest that they have a place or a bench or anything that they want to start just to have a memorial for a young person.
Thankfully, I do think that so many of these colleges have seen time and time again stories like Yardley's pop up, and they do not want to be the next campus that is under the spotlight for the most terrible reason in the world. So I think the fact that now coaches and programs are stopping to slow down to find a way to make sure that their athletes are as healthy as they can be, especially in their relationships, and trying to really arm them with curriculum and conversation and workshops that are going to make them better humans, better players, just all around better people is so important, and it does make me feel more hopeful for the future.
I would say it's across the board, but I do think student athletes and professional athletes are certainly highlighted. So you hear that story more often. Winning isn't everything. We need to remind the kids, this is your mindset on a field and in a game, but in a relationship, it is exactly not that. If you bring that mindset off the court, off the field, and into a relationship, you're doomed.
It's always hard for me, even after covering crime stories for 20 years, to understand why certain stories take off and capture the public imagination. This one resonated for so many because these were two people from a like background, well-to-do, terrific potential. Their lives collided in unexpected ways, resulting in horrific violence and a terrible loss. So many people look at lives like these and think, well, they've got it all figured out. They've got it together. It's not going to happen to these people. And so when it does, it jerks our eyes and holds us hostage.
Can't reverse what was done, so justice is not necessarily in my vocabulary, but I think everybody did the absolute best they could, and we got the best outcome possible. But it didn't bring Yardley back.